two of them, and one more specifically, would protect Chick-fil-A when the government tries to punish them because of their religious beliefs. That's House Bill 3172. Some people are calling it the Chick-fil-A bill. There are going to be hundreds of people that come to the Capitol, and we want your listeners to be one of them. So if they go to SaveChickFilA.com or go to our main website, we want them to take action. We want them to consider coming to the Capitol on Wednesday to support these religious freedom bills.
Again, that's a House State Affairs Committee. And again, I would encourage some of you in the state of Texas to make that a day, because you can actually see the testimony and then also tour the Capitol and maybe even visit your legislator. So first of all, I do have an action item for you to go. But if not, there is a very helpful material to fill out at Chick-fil-A.com, because it asks for your name, address, then it has a sample message and a send. That's something, of course, you've put together. We've done that kind of thing before on Point of View. So if somebody can't make it, or even if somebody that is not even in the state of Texas wanted to express their opinion, they could probably do so. But the bottom line is, if you have an elected representative, he or she needs to know what you feel about this issue of Chick-fil-A and the broader issue of supporting religious freedom, because some people might say, well, I don't eat at Chick-fil-A, I don't really care. But you better care, because I've also compiled a list of all the professions Christians cannot go to if the direction of religious liberty goes the other direction. We're talking about photographers and bakers and florists, and we're talking about people in the hospitality industry, people in counseling, in teaching, or even somebody running a small restaurant like Chick-fil-A. I mean, this just, I think, illustrates the fact that we didn't pick this fight, but we're not going to back away from it either, right?
Well, that's exactly right. And look, Chick-fil-A is one of the most successful businesses in the market they're in, yet they're still being attacked. And look, I pray that it doesn't impact their business, but when the government starts making it difficult for them to do business, it doesn't take long for that to have some type of impact. And look, to Chick-fil-A's credit, other governments have tried to take action against them over the past couple of years, and they continue to find a way to stay competitive in their market, but it's gone too far. And if San Antonio's not stopped, if they're allowed to the government's allowed to do this in Texas, people in other states are going to think it's just much easier, because they know the strong support for religious freedom and Christian values that you oftentimes find in the state of Texas. And not only that, but just for the free market. I mean, just from the perspective of government should stay out of the business of telling Chick-fil-A what to do. And I think it's important for people to understand as we frame this, and it's not just about Chick-fil-A, but this is an actual situation that's going on. So it's illustrative of what the government is doing against people of religious beliefs and Christians on marriage and sexuality issues. Chick-fil-A did not do anything to any of their employees. It had nothing to do with anything that happened in their restaurant. This action is being targeted against them because of donations that they gave to a nonprofit ministry. And one of those is the Salvation Army. They feed homeless people. They give shelter. They do all kinds of charitable things. And so even that, apparently, to some government people in San Antonio, is not okay. But we don't have to just stand here and take it. We can do something about it. And if you can't make it to the Capitol on Wednesday, I encourage you to do that. Our office is 2 blocks from the Capitol. We'll help you get prepared. We'll have Chick-fil-A being served all day. We're going to take care of you if you make the trip. But if for some reason you can't, go to your local Chick-fil-A, wherever you are across the country, and have some of their food, post on social media a picture of it, and hashtag Save Chick-fil-A. So that message can go across the country no matter where you are, so you can have an impact to make people know that the government should not be punishing people and businesses, owners like Chick-fil-A, because of their religious beliefs.
We're going to come back and continue our conversation with Jonathan Saenz, but the other day we posted a piece by David French, who also said, there's really zero difference between giving to the Fellowship of Christian Athletes or even Salvation Army and, say, given to a youth ministry at your local Baptist church. And so I want you to understand that you may just be saying, well, this is just about a restaurant, and I don't have much care about that. If you care about your church, you care about your pastor, you should pay attention to these issues. And, of course, there's some other legislation as well, the Texas Professional Protection Act and a few more. So we'll kind of run through some of that legislation, and then you have your marching orders. Let's take a break. We'll continue our conversation right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Today is tax day, but a more important date is Tax Freedom Day. That is the date when your tax burden is lifted. It is calculated by dividing the official government tally of all taxes collected in each year by the amount of all income earned in each year. Put another way, it's when you're no longer working for the government but are now working for yourself and your family. This year, Tax Freedom Day occurs at the end of the week. And remember, this is an average. Citizens in states like Louisiana already have had their Tax Freedom Day. Citizens in New York have to wait until the middle of May for their Tax Freedom Day. And let me also add that Americans will pay more in taxes than they will spend on food, clothing, and housing combined. But before you declare your freedom from government, I need to tell you about another date. It is called the Cost of Government Day. That's the date on which an average American is paid his share of the financial burden imposed by the spending and regulation that occurs on the federal, state, and local levels. That date occurs a few days after the 4th of July. This date is a little less precise since it is difficult to calculate all the cost of government regulations. Even so, the Cost of Government Day really puts things in perspective. It takes a little more than half of the year to finally get government off your back so that you can begin to earn a living for you and your family. Now, both of these dates help us realize what is happening around us. There is a cost, but often we don't see it. Our taxes are withheld from each paycheck, so we don't often think about what we are paying. And since the cost of most regulations is hidden, we don't see those costs either. But imagine if we had to pay all our taxes today in one lump sum. You can bet there'd be an outcry. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From 20th Century Fox and Franklin Entertainment, Breakthrough, starring Chrissy Metz, based on a true story. Breakthrough, rated PG, in theaters Wednesday, April 17th.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, Jonathan Saenz with us for a little bit longer. And let's just, if we can, Jonathan, talk about some of this legislation. You know, when we first started talking to you, we talked about the hashtag Ban the Bible bills. And, of course, one of those was your religious freedom for Texas professionals. And as I mentioned just a minute ago, if you look around the nation, much of this has not happened in Texas until now, but you have a photographer in New Mexico fined for declining to photograph a lesbian commitment ceremony. You have, of course, bakers in Oregon and in Colorado actually getting criminal penalties, one even suggesting jail time for declining to be involved in a gay wedding ceremony. You've got the florist in Washington being sued by the Attorney General and trying to essentially be bankrupted. And you've got individuals in the hospitality arena, individuals on college campuses and counseling or other aspects of education that have all been facing this. And then you add into it the things you've been looking at as well in terms of these various professions. So that's one of the reasons why you started looking at some of these bills in both the Senate and in the House so that you would protect license holders and other individuals who find themselves in the crosshairs. And it started out just by talking about ban the Bible bills and then some of the Texas Professional Act. But the Chick-fil-A thing was just a very vivid reminder that even though we may look at what's happened in some of the blue states, some of it's come even to the red state of the state of Texas, hasn't it?
Well, that's right. And actually, I failed to mention this, on Save Chick-fil-A Day, Wednesday, April 17th, in the same hearing that the House State Affairs at the Texas Capitol is hearing bills on religious freedom, House Bill 1035 and House Bill 3172. There's also a Ban the Bible bill that's scheduled for that same day. I mean, Kerby, look,
isn't it amazing?
We know the power of our Lord. We know know the power in the way our Lord scripts things. I mean, it's Holy Week also. I just cannot, it gives me goosebumps and just makes me emotional when I think about how things come together sometimes, and it's absolutely extraordinary. And so it is a tremendous opportunity for people to testify in favor of religious freedom, but also for people to see the contrast of what the other side, so to speak, or some people want on the extreme of some of these issues. They want state laws and local laws that punish people, even jail time, even criminal penalties. That's
right.
what House Bill 244 does on sexual orientation, gender identity. And one of the reasons why the San Antonio City Council was in a position to take action against Chick-fil-A is because they have a local ordinance that puts sexual orientation, gender identity essentially above the rights of religious freedom. So you got a chance on Wednesday to deal with that. I just want to do a shout out real quick, though, to our Texas Senator Ted Cruz, who tweeted out on Friday a retweet of our Save Chick-fil-A Day on our Twitter, on Texas Values Twitter, and we're so appreciative of that. He's got 3.3 million followers, so he reaches more people than we do. But we communicated with his team, and they quickly said, we'd love to help. And so they sent that out to all their folks, got tremendous response. If you haven't gone to the Facebook page yet, the Save Chick-fil-A Facebook page, and put on there that you're going so more people know how this is catching on. We've had thousands of people already on there. And also Chip Roy has messaged on this, so is First Liberty. And then as well, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West retweeted it as well. So we appreciate them getting the word out. But you're absolutely right, Kerby. A lot of this fight really has started with efforts to really punish people and to put the words and the concepts of sexual orientation, gender identity into so-called non-discrimination laws, but we've seen those used as weapons. The religious freedom bills are a shield. They're not a sword. But these sexual orientation, gender identity bills, these ban the Bible bills, why are we calling them that? Because if the government says you're going to be punished based on your beliefs on marriage, what is the marriage belief? Where is it coming from? It's coming from the Bible for so many people, right? And it's becoming from on sexualities where God said he created them male and female. The source and the target for some people is the Bible. So if you're banning and not allowed to have those beliefs, whether it's in deed, whether it's in word or deed, or it's a part of your business, the government has effectively banned the Bible because that is the source of that belief. And so House Bill 244 is a ban the Bible bill. It's on the list of bills to be heard in the same committee, House State Affairs, on coming up on April 17th. And Senate Bill 17 also addresses these issues. It's a religious freedom bill that already passed the Senate,
right.
Bipartisan support. It's headed over to the House, and it deals with if you have a certain occupational license, if you could be targeted. And not only that, Kerby, it covers whether or not you have a membership in a religious organization. We've seen even people, it has nothing to do with their business, but they are a member of a particular service organization that's religious or Christian-based, and people start targeting them because of that and try to encourage the government to make it hard for them to be in certain fields of certain fields of practice, including law, including counselors. And look, you should not have to choose between whether you're going to work or practice your faith. Senate Bill 17 makes it clear that you shouldn't have to do that.
And again, that one passed the Senate, and of course you then have a companion bill with House Bill 2827, Representative King, and so you might also want to contact your representative about that. And again, like you said, fortuitous that House Bill 244 by Representative Farrar, which is kind of one of those ban the Bible bills, is in a sense going to be considered at the same time as the so-called Chick-fil-A bill. So I think it is kind of interesting, and I think it underscores something else, and that is there are going to be a number of gay activists that will show up at that hearing as well. True?
Oh, they're going to line up in that room. Okay, look, on Wednesday, April 17th, you're going to have the opposition there in strong numbers, without question. And it's not always about who brings as many people as the other. I mean, it's about what makes sense for public policy. But it does have some relevance to this discussion. The other side likes to say on this issue that perception is a reality. So they even though we've had 70,000 email messages and social media messages to elected officials saying no to ban the Bible bill, if you only have a few people show up to a hearing, then people start to wonder. I just want to tell people, if you ever think about, people ask me this, when is the best time? When is that one day I could come to the Capitol, right? People, it's hard to travel to Austin. Their office is not 2 blocks away, or this isn't a part of what they do every day of the full-time job like I do in my team of 10 people. So if you ask me that question, there's very few times that I could identify just one day. But this is without a doubt, authentically, one of the best days you are ever going to find to come to the Capitol and make a difference. You, without a doubt, there's also a pro-life bill being heard that day too, that I could touch on a little bit that we're supporting as well. If there's one day I could say April 17th in House State Affairs, without question, if you come that day and you get involved in one way or another, you can say without a question, I came on one of the best days, if not the best day, during the 2019 session to make a difference for faith, family, and freedom in Texas.
Well, again, that's this Wednesday on the 17th. And talk about that pro-life bill. We've got about 2 minutes, and I thought it would be something to mention as well, since we've been talking about so much on religious freedom. I know you were also paying attention to the pro-life legislation as well.
Well, absolutely. And just keep in mind, a lot of the religious liberty bills that we support have conscience protection for people when it relates to issues of the government trying to force them to perform an abortion that goes against their beliefs and so on. Those are covered in religious freedom bills we're working on. And then there's a bill that specifically makes it clear that you can't perform discriminatory abortions. And it's hard to think about that, right? People are making decisions to perform abortions based on the race of someone or their perception that they're told, oh, this child's going to have a disability. And so, but those things are happening. There's reported cases of those things happening, and there's tremendous concern for that. And that's why we're going to be supporting a bill that makes it clear that you shouldn't have those type of abortions taking place. Obviously, we're pro-life across the board. The bill is House Bill 2434 by State Representative Matt Schaefer, and that's going to be in the same hearing that day.
Wow.
Kerby, it's going to be one of the most important places to be in the state of Texas. And even if you want to just sign in, come to the Capitol and sign your name electronically. So the members review those after the fact, and they do look at numbers. Who all was here? Even if you're nervous about testifying, we can get you ready to testify. You don't have to have expert testimony. You just need to be a voter in the state of Texas and want to have your voice heard. You count, okay? But if for some reason that's too much for you, you just want to sign in and be in the room and pray for us. Pray for everybody there on April 17th. It's going to be really important. And this is certainly a faith, family, and freedom day across the board.
Well, again, you have already had one day where you brought people to the Capitol. This is another one. So, again, this Wednesday, all the information you need to know, you can certainly go to a variety of different places. Of course, the best way is simply just to go to txvalues.org, or if you also want to go to the other one, savechickfilA.com. Both of those information items and links are on our website. So, Jonathan, thank you for joining us, and look forward to a big turnout on Wednesday.
Well, God bless you, too, and the time you spend with your family and all of your listeners as we reflect later this week on why it's so important for the work we're doing for faith, family, and freedom because of the ultimate sacrifice that was made for us. And we're so happy that we'll get to spend some time doing that with our family and friends later this week as we celebrate and reflect on the death and then the resurrection of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
We'll be right back.
It wasn't long ago, it seemed every official decision brought religious liberty and our ability to live as faithful Christians into question. Some of us wondered how long it would be before we were literally forced to choose between obeying God or men. That pressure seems to have subsided just a bit, and now is the time not to take a breath, but to work as hard as we can for the future of our nation. Thanks to you, Point of View is doing just that. And our special thanks to those who have become members of Truth Team 360. In football, 22 guys battle it out on the field while 40 or 60,000 watch in the stands and perhaps hundreds of thousands more watch on television. We need a special few to get out of the seats and into the game. Join today by calling 1-800-347-5151 and ask to join the Truth Team, or visit us online at pointofview.net/team. We really do need you. The nation needs you. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Had a chance to hear from Jonathan Saenz. And you, or especially those of you in the state of Texas, have your action items in front of you, so your marching orders, if you will. And that is, if you can attend the event, that will be the testimony taking place in the Texas State Capitol on Wednesday. Please do so. If not, there's just a way in which they have provided for you to contact your elected representative. And that will be an opportunity for you to exercise your civic duty. He did mention Ted Cruz, and I thought I might, as a program note, mention that tomorrow at 1 o'clock we will have Rafael Cruz, his father, in studio. There's a couple of reasons for that, and that is, first of all, just a great testimony, as we have talked about that with him before. Individual that grew up and saw what it's like to live around socialism and to have somebody who's elected kind of on a platform of hope and change, and turns out it was change, but it wasn't hopeful. And so we wanted to talk about that, especially in light of the fact that we focused about 2 weeks ago on our Truth Team on socialism, a clear and present danger, and the response was underwhelming, to be perfectly honest. I mean, we probably had fewer donations than we've had in many of the other times. Whenever we sometimes talk about socialism, people go, whatever. And I don't know if it's because we have now a whole generation of young people that are convinced there's nothing wrong with socialism. And that's certainly a reason to listen to Rafael Cruz tomorrow. Or maybe just say, well, it's not that big a deal, we're not worried about it. But this is why we cover these kinds of programs and these kinds of topics every day here on Point of View. Since we were talking about abortion, I thought I might, for just a minute, talk about the movie Unplanned, which is done relatively well. But interestingly enough, John Smirek, who's been on the program with us a number of times, raises a question in a latest article in The Stream: is Google right to call unplanned propaganda? In a little bit, I'm going to get into this issue of big tech censorship. But he says, is anybody surprised at the news that Google labeled the movie Unplanned as propaganda, or that none of Michael Moore's polemical movies got that label? And again, as he said, this kind of social media bias is so familiar that it's tempting to yawn off. Of course, the main means of communication in America are completely controlled by the left, he says. No, they're not subject to the First Amendment or even libel law. That's because of a legal loophole that actually should be fixed and isn't, and I'll come back to that in just a minute to explain what that is. But nevertheless, instead of banging our heads against, well, let's step back and do some useful thinking. And he then goes in his article talking about various ways in which this whole idea of propaganda has been promoted over the years. But his big question, which you find on the second page, is the problem really comes when publications or platforms pretend to neutrality and objectivity, then instead practice persuasion. That's the issue of the mainstream media. Their whole prestige is built on the claim of honest objectivity. Likewise with social media. Facebook and Twitter only avoid the rigors of libel and defamation law through their claim to be merely neutral platforms, which of course they don't. And the more they edit content to suit their political viewpoints, the more they serve as publishers. They ought to be subjected to the lawsuits from the likes of Nick Sandmann. You might remember him. He's that boy from Kentucky with the MAGA hat who was vilified so much. And so those are some comments that John Smirek made. But we can sit here and be so upset about some of the darkness, but how about lighting some lamps? This is amazing to me. This comes from a recent study here that said that in a recent congressional testimony, and that would be Chuck Councilman, he was the other day at the Senate subcommittee of the Senate Judiciary, and I'll get to that in just a minute and talk about what was happening there. But nevertheless, the writer and director of Unplanned, he co-authored this with an individual we interviewed just a couple of weeks ago on the movie, reported that he knows of almost 100 abortion clinic employees who have undertaken to leave the abortion industry after seeing the film Unplanned. Can you believe that? The actual number, I guess, is 94 clinic workers have approached Abby Johnson's nonprofit organization, and there were none, according to the work done by our friends at Pure Flix. Now, you might say, okay, Abby Johnson, well, she's the individual that the film is about. She was the former Planned Parenthood clinic director, the youngest one, an award winner for Planned Parenthood until she changed sides. Then she got to be vilified. They attempted to close her down, keep her from being able to speak out. And if nothing else, that was something. And then, of course, you have had all the barriers that Unplanned, the movie, has faced. Let's see if we can count them all, and I'm sure I'm going to miss a few. But first of all, it was the decision by most of the mainstream media, with one or two exceptions, most of the mainstream media to not even allow ads to air. So you can't even let people know the movie's coming out. Then the decision by the MMPAA, which was to actually give it an R rating, which, given the fact that I've seen some PG and PG-13 ones that certainly do not have anywhere near the one scene where there is a little bit of blood, because indeed it's a botched abortion. But that was enough for them to slap that on, which then creates the irony, as we talked about with Colonel Allen West a while back, that you can be under the age of 18 and get an abortion, but you can't be under the age of 18 to see the movie, although some can with a parent. You know how that goes. But anyway, that's another aspect. Then, of course, the Twitter account, because that was one of the things where the Twitter account was temporarily suspended. They said it was just coincidence, but, that never happens for Michael Moore's films. It never happens for Disney. Never had a problem with Aladdin or anything else, but always seems to happen with these conservative or Christian or pro-life films. And so that was the case. Then, as I've even heard more recently, when the Twitter account came back online, some of those following links were never reinstituted, so there are just all sorts of issues there. So if nothing else, Councilman said that the social media platform undeservedly targeted the film's Twitter presence because of its pro-life perspective. And then he goes on to say, meanwhile, Planned Parenthood, an organization that actually kills babies every single day, still had an active Twitter account in good standing. And so that gives you just a little bit of an idea of what has been taking place here. And as I mentioned before, if you're not familiar, Unplanned tells the story of Abby Johnson's relationship with abortion before, during, and after her 8-year career in Planned Parenthood, and talks about the fact that because she did have an abortion or two, she felt that that was the way she was helping other women. But this film has really begun to get people's attention, including some of those clinic workers. And this is, of course, a ministry that she actually developed after she left the clinic, and it's called And Then There Were None. And they have just an enormous number of individuals that are abortion clinic workers that have left. But now that has picked up rather precipitously, which leads me to one more comment before we take a break, and then I'll come back and talk about why some of this surfaced in a Senate Judiciary Committee meeting. And that is Pastor Jensen Franklin. Not that familiar with him, but of course some of you have perhaps seen him on television before. But on his particular program and at his church, the Free Chapel, which is in Georgia, he actually called for people to gather together because of Unplanned, and to maybe set aside, at least momentarily, some of their denominational distinctives to at least stand in unity on this issue of pro-life. He said, we no longer have the luxury of disunity in the body of Christ. He actually added that to all Christian denominations, Catholic, Baptist, Methodist, Pentecostals, a number of others, are joined. And he says, the lines have been drawn. Stand up for life and stand up for compassion and grace for those that have experienced abortion. We dare not be silent in such a time as this. And so then Abby Johnson was brought to the stage, and she said most people who work inside these abortion clinics are not there because they love abortion. They're there because of misguided compassion, she said. She went on to say, I was ignorant surrounding the topic of abortion. It was my ignorance, it was my naivete that led me inside the doors of the abortion industry. And nevertheless, as she found, she changed her mind, and of course she has been instrumental in bringing many other people out of the abortion clinic business. And so an individual who actually had an abortion or two, now says that she is pregnant with her 8th child. So it's kind of interesting to see how that's played out as well. But I just wanted to give you some news. Obviously, it is unfair that Google slapped on Unplanned the label propaganda when it never has done that for any of these other very activist, polemical films. Michael Moore is certainly one category of that. But more importantly, how about celebrating some victories? Not only the number of lives that probably have been changed because of the movie Unplanned, but the number of individuals, now numbering almost 100, that have left the abortion clinics. We're going to take a break. We have a lot more to cover. We'll be back right after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
I thought I might give you an update. We did not have a chance to talk about it on Friday, but there was a hearing in front of the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee. It's actually listed as the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution, but it was an opportunity for executives, at least from Facebook and Twitter, to testify and then to actually respond to questions from a number of U.S. senators. There was a desire at one point to actually have Google as part of that as well, but because the individual that would have been invited was not comparable in terms of status, hierarchy, positioning in the organization, they decided to do that one later. By the way, it was kind of interesting because in some respects we found that Google actually has been a very significant abuser of some of the censorship. And Facebook, although it came in for some criticism, has been one that our friends at Unplanned actually said treated them more fairly than the others. But they're all part of what I call the big tech. And next week, you'll see a commentary that I have coming out on big tech censorship. It's not the first time we've talked about it. Certainly won't be the last time. But if nothing else, this was a testimony that they gave just about a week and a half ago. And what was interesting is what was said by those who were executives for the big tech company. The executive, for example, from Twitter stressed that his platform does not use political viewpoints, perspective, or party affiliation in making decisions about content or rankings. The other executive from Facebook wanted to state unequivocally that Facebook does not favor one political viewpoint over another, nor does Facebook suppress conservative speech. Okay, so those are their statements, and I think that's a fair assessment of some of the other things they said. There are some good articles we can point you to, but I think that's a good 1 or 2 sentence summary of their position. Let's hear now what happened on the other side of that from the senators. One of those is Senator Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee. She wanted to know why her pro-life ad was pulled during the 2018 campaign. And the reason they said was because it was inflammatory. But it was interesting because she said, well, should Facebook allow ads urging that we save sea turtles or baby seals? Yeah. The answer was, yeah, I think that'd be fine. Should Twitter allow ads that denounce Planned Parenthood for selling baby body parts? And at that point, the executive said, well, every ad is judged within context, but we made a mistake on your ad, and I apologize. So she did get a little bit of an apology, but, you know, the campaign is over. She's using this to illustrate the difference between her and her opponent, the concern that her opponent would continue to fund Planned Parenthood. She wanted to defund it for lots of reasons. One of those is the selling of baby parts, but that was not allowed. And so obviously you could see that that was kind of one of the issues of contention. Then we come to Senator Ted Cruz. By the way, Mike Lee was right next to him. He had this big poster, and it showed an ad by the Susan B. Anthony list. And you know that we've had most of those individuals who have been associated with that organization, Marjorie Dannenfelser and others. And that one was banned because it had, are you ready for this? Close your ears if you're going to be upset, had a picture of Mother Teresa. And it had Mother Teresa's very famous quote that abortion is profoundly anti-woman. And that was enough to get that banned. I love the poster that is there because at the very top it has the word censored. And then we want to come back to Unplanned. A good portion of that was on the subject of Unplanned. And Chuck Konzelman, of course, is the writer and director of the movie Unplanned. By the way, he's the co-author with Solomon, who was on the program with us as well. But nevertheless, he told the story of all the obstacles he faced in marketing the movie through Google and Twitter. He did give at least partial credit for the fact that at least in that regard, Facebook was one social media platform that they didn't have problems with. But he said not only did Twitter drop their ad and drop their appearance, he said Twitter apparently deleted the vast majority of those who were listed as followers for our account, reducing the number from something on the order of 200,000 to less than 200. 1,000 to 1 reduction is certainly the case. And, of course, what the response was from Twitter is, well, we reinstated the at Unplanned Movie account as soon as it was brought to our attention that the new account was not intended for similar volitive activity. And he said it was a glitch in the automated system. And maybe it was. But all I know is it almost always seems to happen for the pro-life movies, the pro-Christian movies, the conservative movies, and none other. One other one that came up, Marsha Blackburn came back to the fact that here you also had this committee that was established by Google. And again, fair, Google wasn't there at the moment, so they couldn't respond. But it was an ethics board that they finally completely just shut it down. And the reason is because one of the people on the panel, interestingly enough, was Kay Cole James. And you go, well, what's the problem? Well, she's president of the Heritage Foundation. And as Marsha Blackburn said, for these employees in Silicon Valley, conservative credentials are absolutely a scarlet letter. So just having one conservative on the panel was enough for so many people at Google and the other social media outlets to say, you cannot go forward with this because you have one of those people on your panel. Can you believe it? Meanwhile, if you happen to be reading the Wall Street Journal today, Dr. Oz, you know who Dr. Oz is, and of course has his own program, used to be on with Oprah Winfrey. He's been saying, while Facebook has just been dropping all sorts of ads and all sorts of content, they leave up some things that shouldn't be there in the first place. And I love the way he writes this piece. He says, if you use Facebook, and all of us do, you might have seen Dr. Oz's diabetes breakthrough promising a cure for diabetes and regulating blood sugar in 2 weeks. Then you might have seen Denzel Washington uses an all-natural pills to cure his ED. Bill Gates says that these brain-boosting pills will double your IQ. And the point that Dr. Oz is making is that these are bogus endorsements. They are actually, if anything, something that should be completely regulated by Facebook and are not. And so as a result, you have this situation that has unfolded, and it brings us back to this law back in 1996. Bill Clinton was the president. There was an attempt to try to protect those fledgling internet websites through the Communications Decency Act, which said that web platforms cannot be held liable for content that they host. And so as a result, these platforms can collect the money knowing full well that they will not be sued for libel when these essentially are spam on Facebook. And so the argument that Dr. Oz is making, which I agree with, is Facebook should impose these anti-spam ad measures globally. Others, including Yahoo, Google, Instagram, and Snap, should do the same. New tools based on artificial intelligence enable tech companies to monitor and manage these platforms. And even if they don't, have you not seen those ads? If you haven't been on Facebook very much. And so while Facebook and all these others are removing conservative content, they're leaving up these potentially libelous as well as potentially dangerous. Who knows what's in some of these pills that are being offered here? And they're bilking people out of money. So I want you to see the contrast between allowing some of these ads, which are phony ads, to stay on Facebook at the same time when some of those particular ads or even some of these Twitter posts just accidentally get eliminated. Just a little bit more of a look at what sometimes is just the bizarre world of big tech censorship. Let's take a break, though. When we come back, we're going to talk about the movie Breakthrough. We're actually going to talk about the young man who survived that incredible, almost miraculous event. We'll be back right after this.
Is religious freedom still a cornerstone of the Republic, or has it effectively been crushed by the forces of tolerance? America needs Christians to be informed and as unified as possible, applying God's wisdom to civic life. Point of view can be a key part of a successful mission. I believe in America. I believe God wants His best for us. We can face whatever the world throws at us as long as we stand together. If you have not signed on, please do it now. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. Pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Or call us 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today. We certainly want to encourage you to pay your taxes. Today is tax day, and a little bit later I'm going to talk a little bit about this, because we do pay our taxes, and at a time when there is probably more revenue coming into the federal treasury than ever before. Nevertheless, the average taxpayer is going to have to pay about $2,000 of your taxes just to cover the interest on the debt, which brings us back to some of the concerns about the national debt. So we may talk about that a little bit later. Of course, I want to send kudos to Tiger Woods for winning the Masters, and there are some great comments we can make about that a little bit later. And for those of you that have been kind of following the movie Unplanned, which has done very well, we also had testimony just the other day in front of the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution. Chuck Konselman, who's the writer and director with Unplanned, and his co-worker we've actually had on the program, and of course the person that's the film is about, Abby Johnson, remarked that we have, I think it's 94 different abortion clinic employees who now have approached Abby Johnson's nonprofit organization, and then there were none, and have left the abortion business. So we've got some great news that's coming down as a result of the Unplanned film. And so for a few minutes before we get into some of that, I wanted to talk about another film that you might want to put on your schedule as well, and that is Breakthrough. As a matter of fact, in just a minute, we're going to be making available to those of you, first come, first serve, some tickets and copies of the book Breakthrough. But in order to understand a little bit more about this film coming out and to encourage you to attend it, we have now John Smith with us. It is his story. Interestingly enough, he was born in Guatemala, adopted by Brian and Joyce Smith at about 5 months, moved to St. Charles, Missouri, and of course, as you may have seen if you see the trailer, went through an incredible trauma. So, John, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I guess we need to take you out to that frozen lake where you and your buddies were out there, and all of a sudden, boom, you end up in the frozen water. And as a result, even though they were able to save your buddies, they were pretty much convinced that they were not going to save you. They're just going to rescue your body. But can you kind of share a little bit of what took place? Because obviously you may not remember all of the events that transpired, but the movie is all about this incredible series of events surrounding what seems to be almost a miraculous survival on your part. Can you share more?
Yeah, I mean, it was just January 19th, 2015. Me and two friends were out on the ice, and, you know, here in Missouri, it gets really, really cold, and then it can get really warm. Like, we call it bipolar weather. It can be blue as, you know, the sea, and then the next minute we have a tornado warning. That's just how Missouri is. And that is really what had happened at this time of year, is that we had a span of 20-degree days, and then it had gotten warm all of a sudden. And so with that, the ice had frozen over, which is very uncommon for Missouri. So we were out having a good time, and it was a 60-degree day, so the ice was starting to melt. So with that, we were out on it, and we're frankly just walking, like they say, on thin ice. And so with that, my mom called me and asked if I wanted to go play basketball at the local Redplex. I said, of course. She said, I love you. I said, I love you too. 8 seconds later from that phone call, all three of us fall in the ice at Lake St. Louis. One was able to self-rescue because he was close to the dock. Me and my other buddy were 25 to 50 feet out from shore. There was no way we could get back because of the ice in between us, so we are basically stranded. We did the best we could. Paramedics arrived and saved him, but unfortunately, I had drowned at this point.
But at that point, because it's so cold, even though your body's shut down and you're underwater for, in round numbers, about 15 minutes, if I remember the story, then you are taken to a hospital. And at this point, we bring your mother back into this because then she decides, even though they have given up on you on the table, she's praying for you. So share the rest of that, if you might.
So my mom, if you have met my mom, she is the biggest mama bear you're ever going to meet. That's just who my mama is. And so when she got the call, she was obviously very frantic. I'm very, very, very worried. They had actually prayed for me for 17 years because they had 2 miscarriages before me. And so she gets the call, and she honestly doesn't know I'm dead. She just thinks that, you know, they're taking a break. I don't know what she was thinking, but for some reason, my mom was not believing that I was dead. So they call her in to the waiting room. And another fun fact is they actually waited to call time of death on this. Usually they call time of death immediately when a patient dies, but in this case, they didn't. They just I can't tell you why other than it's God oriented, but they didn't call time of death. They bring my mom in. They said when my mom walked in the room, something walked in with her that not only changed the atmosphere in the room, but the physical temperature in the room. And they said when she prayed for me, something rushed up my body so powerful that it pushed 3 nurses back. Keep in mind that one of these nurses is about 6'6", 250 plus. Okay? She prayed for me, and not a minute later, not 5 minutes later, that moment, I got a pulse.
Wow.
They had done everything.
Anybody watch the trailer can see how dramatic that was as well. But again, this was something that seemed to defy some of the medical odds, don't you think?
Yes, there's 300 plus pages of medical documents. Some of the best scientists in the world, one of them is a world-renowned expert in hypothermia and drowning. He will get on record and say this is a bona fide miracle, and they simply can't explain it. I mean, he took some serious heat claiming that this is a miracle. One of the doctors, Dr. Kent Sutter, even said, science can only go so far, and then there's God. This is God.
Let's take a break because I want to keep you on just a little bit longer if I can do so, because I want people to understand that this is a film that is coming out. The first thing is we have a link to breakthroughmovie.com. And so, first of all, you can watch the trailer. So I encourage you to watch the trailer. It is only going to take you about 2.5 minutes, actually less than that. And it's a great opportunity to find out a little bit more. But then second of all, of course, you can find theaters near you and get tickets. And as we've said on this program so many times before, this is important because when it begins to arrive, this is an opportunity for you to make a difference. It's in theaters this Wednesday, April 17th, and so we really want to encourage you not only to go, but there's a place there where you can also name your date and take your group. But I wanted to offer something else that we rarely do here on Point of View, because our friends there in that particular movie have made available 10 pairs of electronic movie tickets codes. And so that means that if you are one of the first to either call a number I'm going to give or to go online and ask for those, we can give you a pair of tickets and a copy of the book Breakthrough, the miraculous true story of a mother's faith and her child's resurrection. So again, you can either call or order line number 800-347-5151 and say, I'd like a pair of tickets and a book. Or you can simply go to pointofview.net. It'll be, of course, first come, first serve, and given the national broadcast, they'll probably go pretty quickly. We'll come back and talk more with John Smith about his incredible story right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Today is tax day, but a more important date is Tax Freedom Day. That is the date when your tax burden is lifted. It is calculated by dividing the official government tally of all taxes collected in each year by the amount of all income earned in each year. Put another way, it's when you're no longer working for the government but are now working for yourself and your family. This year, Tax Freedom Day occurs at the end of the week. And remember, this is an average. Citizens in states like Louisiana already have had their Tax Freedom Day. Citizens in New York have to wait until the middle of May for their Tax Freedom Day. And let me also add that Americans will pay more in taxes than they will spend on food, clothing, and housing combined. But before you declare your freedom from government, I need to tell you about another date. It is called the Cost of Government Day. That's the date on which an average American is paid his share of the financial burden imposed by the spending and regulation that occurs on the federal, state, and local levels. That date occurs a few days after the 4th of July. This date is a little less precise since it is difficult to calculate all the cost of government regulations. Even so, the Cost of Government Day really puts things in perspective. It takes a little more than half of the year to finally get government off your back so that you can begin to earn a living for you and your family. Now, both of these dates help us realize what is happening around us. There is a cost, but often we don't see it. Our taxes are withheld from each paycheck, so we don't often think about what we are paying. And since the cost of most regulations is hidden, we don't see those costs either. But imagine if we had to pay all our taxes today in one lump sum. You can bet there would be an outcry. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From 20th Century Fox and Franklin Entertainment, Breakthrough, starring Chrissy Metz, based on a true story. Breakthrough, rated PG, in theaters Wednesday, April 17th.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, John Smith with us for a few more minutes. And, of course, he is the primary focus in the film, which is called Breakthrough. And if you'd like to know a little bit more, you can go to our website and click on the picture, which tells you more about Breakthrough. If, by the way, you want to have it in Spanish, on the upper right-hand corner, you can have it in Espanol so that you can either see some of this information in English or Spanish. And, of course, since John is originally from Guatemala, as a matter of fact, my two most recent books are also in English and Spanish as well. But if you want to know more about getting those tickets, and I suspect they'll go pretty quickly, we do have a sidebar there. It says register for tickets on Breakthrough, and that's just something that the movie company decided to provide as a thank you for those of you listening to Point of View. But, John, of course, we talked about your mom. There's another individual that figures very prominently in this particular movie, and that is Pastor Jason. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with him?
Oh, Pastor Jason. He's a doll. I love him. So Pastor Jason had only been at the church for 3 months before this accident had happened. So I really didn't know him. I mean, we weren't close. We weren't anything. Like, I wasn't a huge fan, because he was from the West Coast. I'm from the Midwest. He was trying to bring the West Coast, style in the Midwest. So I wasn't a fan. But Pastor Jason had a huge role in Breakthrough because he did not leave my side of the bed. He'd stay there 9 hours a day, hold my hand, make sure I had everything I needed. Wow. And there's a very symbolic scene in the film, and it's where there's one tear drop off my cheek. And it's just a symbol of me understanding and me being cognitive. Well, that scene had actually happened with Pastor Jason, and it was him asking me if I wanted him to stay, and I squeezed his hand saying yes, and that tear just fell down my cheek.
Wow.
So it's a brotherhood, it's a family. He moved to Medford, Oregon. He's no longer in St. Louis, but he's one call away, and if I need him, he's always there.
Let's, if we can, talk about the impact that it's had on you. Many people that have ever listened to Point of View know that the original host, Marlon Maddox, tells a story about where this sort of small cave collapsed on him. He was stopped breathing, and as his individual was running with him in his arms, he revived, and he always wondered, you know, maybe God saved me for a plan. And, of course, those of you listening to Point of View recognize what that plan was, to begin and to continue the program called Point of View. But do you think God had a plan and a purpose through this particular trauma in your life?
Yes, I mean, God has a purpose for everyone's life. And, you know, even though I'm 18 and I still don't understand why, you know, he saved me and not others, I don't even understand. Like, I understand that I'm going into ministry. That is my calling, and that's what I'm looking forward to. But I don't know, you know, where God's going to take me. You know, my job is to simply stay humble and remember that I'm just a St. Louis boy, but I'm extremely blessed to have my life, and I'm extremely blessed, you know, to have this platform to share God with them and stay hungry, you know, staying hungry for what the Lord has for me, what he's done for me, and just continue to strive to be like him.
What are there any residual effects? Some people have wondered about this because you were essentially pronounced dead. You were underwater for 15 minutes. You had essentially drowned, and yet now you sound like you have all your cognitive facilities and you're able to go into this area of ministry. Are there any kind of lasting effects as a result of this trauma?
No, the only little, and it wasn't even because of the accident, it was because they put handcuffs on me because I was trying to pull my tubes out in the hospital. The only little effect I had was a little problem with my wrist. And so after the accident, I was released. I did a little physical therapy for that wrist issue, but I was back playing basketball within a month and a half. And then over the summer, I played for my whole full-out contact basketball team for my high school. And then that winter, I was back to playing full contact, you know, competitive. And so, you know, it was a matter of just days before I got back into the gym and started to rebuild my strength.
Wow. You know, I know you're heading to a Christian college, and you'll have to let us know which one that is, because if I happen to be there, because I speak on a lot of campuses, I'd love to shoot baskets with you. But talk about, as we're coming down to the end here, any encouragement you might have for others, because, as you said, you went through this incredible tragedy and survived. And hard to even figure out why God saved you other than others. But what would you say to families that have gone through similar tragedies with their own children or grandchildren?
I would say this. I said, look at it if they're saved. From a saved point of view, they're in heaven. You know, they're serving our King. They're in a much better place than we could ever imagine. And, you know, I get that it's tough. I've lost family members personally that we actually prayed for. And so it is very hard, but I do understand now, you know, as, you know, I'm growing older, that they're in a better place, and that even though we miss them, we will see them again. To the unbelievers, you know, I've heard a lot of stories of, well, he lost his faith and now he passed away. And I lost my faith at the same time. But honestly, when they tell me that, a lot of them honestly have come back to the Lord in a way because of losing that family member. And I'm not saying God hurts people because, you know, that's just not who God is. But God has a plan for everybody. And that's what I'm trying to get at, is that God has a plan for everybody, and that hopefully the end goal should be to serve the Lord and to serve the kingdom, because I can't express it enough that life is so short. We're not promised tomorrow. My final encouragement would be just enjoy the time you have with your family and your friends, to always live him and to always serve and strive for what he's like, and to strive for to strive for the heavenly goals, not the earthly goals.
Well, John, I appreciate you giving us some time today. We certainly want people to consider going to the movie Breakthrough, which is your story, and I appreciate you giving us some time today here on Point of View.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Let me just mention, as he is heading on to his activities, because he's just a high school student, as you probably figured out by now, we did want to get him on for just a minute, because some of you said, well, what's this breakthrough thing all about? And I thought you would want to hear from him and his story, and I think God is going to use him in a very significant way. He's going to have a testimony or a story, not unlike another friend of mine that was climbing on some cliffs in Hawaii fell and should have died and somehow survived, and has used that as a platform all his life, as he has been kind of the evangelist. Some people call me the kind of the Billy Graham of Hawaii. That may be a little bit much, but, certainly used this as a platform for evangelism. And I think John Smith, being originally from Guatemala, certainly might even be able to reach out to those in the Hispanic community and certainly share his story. So I just wanted you to know about that. But more importantly, the film is coming out, and we always like to encourage you to go to various films that would be life-affirming, and this one certainly is the case. I've been very impressed with the level of acting in the trailer that I've had a chance to see, and also just impressed by the kind of name actors that have ended up in the film. And so, again, as you go to our website, or you can just go to breakthroughmovie.com, there are a couple of buttons. First of all, one for the trailer. I would encourage you to watch the trailer. You might tear up just watching the 2.5-minute trailer. It's pretty powerful. But then there's a place where you can click the button said Find Theaters and get tickets, and then also where you can take your group. And so those are some opportunities in the next few days for you to get involved, and I hope that you would do so, because as I have said so often on this program, we really do need to send a signal to Hollywood that we want more of these kinds of films. Ones that are life-affirming and faith-affirming, and this is just one of the many that we are aware of. And so opening day is Wednesday, April 17th. And so during the Easter weekend, if you want to go to that film, I would encourage you to do so. And we will spend some time now getting back into the news after the break. But let me just also mention that, as I suspected, we made available the 10 pairs of tickets along with the book Breakthrough. Those are now gone, but those of you that grabbed them very quickly or clicked on register for tickets, we have that information there on the website, so you can find out a little bit more about that on the website, pointofview.net. And, of course, you can find out about how to go and get those tickets on your own in a theater near you. Again, the book is called Breakthrough, The Miraculous True Story of a Mother's Faith and Her Child's Resurrection, and I just thought you'd like to know about that. But when we come back from the break, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about a couple of issues in the news, and then let me just give you a program note that in the next hour, we'll have John Barry with us. His book is entitled Jesus Economy, A Biblical View of Poverty, the Culture of Love, and a Pattern for Lasting Change. With things that it certainly seemed to be a focus of our time and attention would certainly be what we can do to help those who are less fortunate and how to apply biblical principles there as well. Of course, it's tax day, and I'll have a few things to say about that when we come back from the break. And of course, I just mentioned one of the best pieces of news from another film, Unplanned. Not only has it done relatively well in the box office, but already they've identified 94 different abortion clinic workers who have approached Abby Johnson's nonprofit organization, in which they have decided to leave the abortion industry after they've seen the film. Pretty impressive. We'll take a break. We have a lot more to cover, and we will do so right after this.
This Easter, from 20th Century Fox and Franklin Entertainment comes Breakthrough, starring Chrissy Metz, based on a true story. When Joy Smith's son John falls through an icy Missouri lake, all hope seems lost. But a mother's belief in the power of prayer inspires her community to trust God to do the impossible.
Please, God, send your Holy Spirit to save my son.
Breakthrough, rated PG, parental guidance suggested. In theaters Wednesday, April 17th. Tickets and showtimes available at breakthroughmovie.com.
Ronald Reagan.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
What are you doing to pass on truth and freedom? As one step, have you joined Point of View Radio's Truth Team? If not, why not? Join today. Go to pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Well, as I mentioned, today is tax day, and of course that is important. If you have not paid your taxes, you better pay them in short order or get an extension. But my commentary today is about Tax Freedom Day, and you've heard me talk about this before, but let me mention it again. It's calculated by dividing the official government tally of all taxes collected in each year by the amount of income earned that year, and then it shows how long if you were to just pay the government every single day before you pay yourself. Of course, we don't. But if you did, Tax Freedom Day will occur sometime near the end of this week. And so think about this. It basically says that you almost work January, February, March, and at least half of April before you get government off your back. And that's pretty significant, especially in light of the fact that the argument in the Hill today, which is the journal of record for Congress, estimates that $2,000 of the average taxpayer's taxes just go to interest on the debt. It's not going to build bridges or defending us at the border or defending us from foreign invaders in the Defense Department or going towards Medicare or Medicaid or Social Security. It's just going to pay the interest on the debt because the debt keeps going up. Here's another little dirty secret. People that worry about the debt almost always the ones out of power. You know, everybody's heard a lot about the national debt when Barack Obama was president from the Republicans. Now you hear a lot about the national debt from Democrats because Donald Trump is the president. So, but you know what? It goes up every year, and we are the ones that have allowed it to take place. But it isn't just Tax Freedom Day. I might mention, by the way, since we broadcast in more than 40 different states, the Tax Freedom Day will, as an average, end later this week. But those of you in Louisiana, you've already had your Tax Freedom Day. Those of you in New York, you won't have your Tax Freedom Day till the middle of May. So it shows you the level of difference in taxation in the various states. But before I finish, let me just mention there's another date, and it's called the Cost of Government Day. That's where they calculated not only the financial burden on you from state, federal, state, and local taxes, but also the regulations, federal, state, and local. And that happens after the 4th of July, which is kind of helpful because you can kind of say Tax Freedom Day is after Tax Day and Cost of Government Day is after the 4th of July. But just think about what that means. That means that you basically work half the year, more than half the year, to basically support the federal, state, and local governments and all the regulations. And we don't really calculate those because those cost of regulations are often hidden. And I'll be very, very honest that even trying to calculate those regulations right now, when some of those have been rescinded under the Trump administration, sometimes it's hard to figure out what those costs are. But just imagine if today you had to pay all your taxes. Most of us have them deducted from our paycheck. But imagine if you had to pay all your taxes today. There would be a revolt. And I think it's just a good illustration of that. But again, back to this national debt, this article that appeared in The Hill says that our debt is 78% of the GDP. And when I saw that, I said, no, that's not right. Well, that's just looking at the online debt. But if you look at the entire cost of government debt and all of our obligations, it's already past the size of the GDP. So something else to pay attention to. And while I'm talking about paying attention to, you need to pay attention to this one bill making its way through Congress. Right now it's in the House. It's called the Equality Act, and it would actually amend the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to include sexual orientation and gender identity. Among other things, not only would it advance the LGBT agenda, but it would also force public schools to expand female athletic teams to include biological males who identify as transgender girls. And I might just mention that my Wednesday commentary this week is about transgender athletes because we've been paying attention to what has already happened in places like Connecticut, where in many cases the two biologically male students who now identify as females have been finished first and second in the 55-meter last year. They were first and second in the 100-meter state track championship. Some of them have set records, and the rate it's going, if this continues, almost all the records held by biological females will be surpassed by biological males who identify them as transgender. By the way, this particular bill, the Equality Act, has 234 Democrat sponsors. There's only 235 Democrats who could sponsor a bill. Of course, that's not counting the Washington, D.C. or Puerto Rico's non-voting representatives. So that means there's only one Democrat that did not sponsor that. Let's give credit to Illinois Representative Dan Lipinski, who, by the way, is the only pro-life Democrat and the only one that did not sponsor the Equality Act. And as far as I know, this particular act does not have any disclaimers or any limitations on religious groups, so that could affect your church as well. But let me, if I can, for a few minutes, address the issue of dementia. And I've even done a commentary on that because I said, imagine if you have an organization, could be a business, could be a ministry, and has a leader that shows early signs of dementia, maybe has a family history of Alzheimer's, gets key facts confused, has language skills that are starting to deteriorate. And I've had to deal with that, first with my father and then even with the leader of a Christian ministry. But what if that leader is the President of the United States? Because we're starting to see more and more people citing examples of where, indeed, President Donald Trump has misspoken. Now, that could be merely the exhaustion of being the president and misspeaking. I do a live radio show. I recognize that sometimes you can get, as I always like to say, your merds wixed, and you can say a little bit here and there. But before we get too far into the 2020 election, I really think that some of the people around the president should advise him to get a full evaluation, because it's going to become a campaign issue with the number of examples that have surfaced even just over the last couple of months. Now, yes, Dr. Ronnie Jackson, who at that time was the president's physician, did administer a very short test, but all it really did was rule out full-blown dementia. But you've got all sorts of examples that people are using. Omarosa Newman, for example, talks about how she knew Donald Trump when he actually did The Apprentice, talked about his incredible mental faculties and his ability to add up numbers in his head and actually tell people that they were fired because they had made some mistakes. And now in her book talks about some things that are a little bit disturbing. You got Michael Wolff in his book, Fire and Fury. Talks about how President Trump did not recognize some of his friends at Mar-a-Lago. Just the other day, of course, the one that I think got a lot of people's attention is where President Trump said, my father was born in Germany, right? A very nice town in Germany. No, his father was born in the Bronx. His grandfather was born in Germany. And then you have all the examples that some of the psychologists have pointed out. Some of the technical terms are semantic paraphasia. That's where you choose incorrect words. For example, when we were talking about the Attorney General William Barr, when he released the letter on the Mueller report, President Trump said, I hope that they now go and take a look at the oranges of that investigation, the beginning of that investigation. Well, he meant to say origins, not origins. Then there's phonemic paraphasia, where he's used different words that sort of sound like but aren't. Missiles become mishes. Space capsule becomes capsicle. The midterm elections become downtome, and I can't even say some of them. And so the question I have is, if you're a Trump supporter, you might say an investigation evaluation might be a good idea just to set that aside. And if by chance an individual who is now the oldest president at the time of his first term, Ronald Reagan was in his second term at 73, but Donald Trump was 72 when he first took his term, has a family of Alzheimer's and some of those other things, it does seem to me that this might be something to consider. And so I'd love to get your thoughts, because if you are for Donald Trump, you would say maybe a survey and a evaluation would be a good idea. If you're not for Donald Trump, I think you'd probably also agree with that as well. And all of that happening long before the 2020 election, I think would be a really good idea. But if you got a comment or an observation, love to hear it. 1-800-351-1212. We come back. I also want to talk a little bit about this Senate hearing that took place just the other day. This was kind of intriguing indeed, because what was happening in the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution gave us a chance to hear not just from the executives of Facebook and Twitter, but also to hear from some of the senators, like Senator Marsha Blackburn, Senator Ted Cruz, Senator Mike Lee, even Chuck Konselman, the writer and director of the movie Unplanned, on what looks like big tech censorship. So I'm going to get into that as well. But if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. If you'd like to find some of the articles that we've been referring to today, or even some of the information about this new film Breakthrough, it's all on the website, pointofview.net. We'll be back right after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Let's go to Susan in Georgia first. Susan, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Hi, how are you?
I am good. Appreciate you calling in today.
Well, it's a beautiful day here in Georgia. Well, my question is, well, I don't think it's a question. It's just a statement that I do have a family history of Alzheimer's and dementia. As a matter of fact, my mother just passed away in 2016 from the Alzheimer's disease. And she actually eventually got a little bit of cancer in her, but she was in the stage 4, but she died from that. Anyway, point I'm saying is I just found out not too long ago that you could get a blood test that could detect the gene inside you that you could have for Alzheimer's and or dementia.
Right.
And it might be something that could be suggested to the president if people are thinking that he does have this. Then it might be something that could be suggested.
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of a clean bill of health. You know, I think some people would say, well, wait a minute, all these comments are coming from critics. Okay, I'll certainly agree that some of those individuals don't like the president, and they're the anti-Trumpers or the never-Trumpers, and got that. But, you know, these begin to sort of add up after a while, and I think a blood test, a neurological investigation, and simply saying that, you know, Ronnie Jackson, who was his physician, performed a very simple test more than a year ago, that's probably not going to answer the question that most voters are going to have. And it seems to me that as we see some of the verbal slips, anybody makes verbal slips. I have never been that critical or tried not to be of individuals. When Barack Obama was a candidate and he talked about visiting 57 states. I know how that happens. You get tired and you say the wrong number or something like that. Everybody makes mistakes like that. Some of the mispronunciations by President George W. Bush. You know, I give people a fair amount of latitude there because some of those examples come from fatigue, from exhaustion, from just, you know, getting tongue-tied. I understand that. But when you start seeing some of the rambling, and that was the other thing I didn't even mention, we're not just talking about things like semantic paraphasia, where you're choosing the wrong word, or even phonemic paraphasia, where you use a word that sort of sounds like it, but it's part of the word. But just sort of these long rambling, this kind of free association, which I used to see with my own father, where just one idea remembers you of another idea, and pretty soon you jam together a whole long list of non sequiturs that don't make any sense. That's why if indeed he's going to be running for re-election, he's going to be involved in some debates, and maybe actually involved in a debate with someone much younger, much quicker on the draw, much quicker in terms of mental acuity, it was going to be really important because, you know, right now the big issue is, well, I want to see the tax returns of Donald Trump. Quite frankly, I'd rather see the tax returns of some of these members of Congress who came to Congress with humble means and actually left Congress as multimillionaires. Those are the tax returns I might like to see, rather than the tax returns of the president. And whether he releases those or not, I don't think that is going to have a big impact on voters. But if they wonder about whether or not the president is up to the job in his second term, that's something I would think that people in the Republican Party would want to know, people around him would want to know, and certainly people that are on the fence about whether or not they would vote for him would want to know. So I'm bringing up the issue, and just notice that I brought it up on April 15th, Tax Day. I got a feeling that nothing will happen, and it'll be this time next year when the president is about ready to turn 74. I believe his birthday's in June. So he's 72 right now. He'll be 73. He'll be 74 when he's running for the presidency. And by the time he's spent a first couple of months in his presidency in the second term, if he was reelected, he'd be 75. There comes a point in time where some people say, okay, he will be the oldest president we've ever had. And we recognize some of the questions that were raised by Ronald Reagan. And, of course, we can go back to the health issues of Woodrow Wilson, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Those are both Democrats. Of course, Ronald Reagan, Donald Trump are Republicans. So this is not a partisan issue, but it is an important one. And so I thought I'd put that on the table for something for you to think about. Just before I take a break, though, I did want to give you a little bit of an update because there were attempts by the executives from both Facebook and Twitter to testify on Capitol Hill. And when they did so, the executive from Twitter said, well, our platform does not use political viewpoints, perspective, or party affiliation in making decisions about content and rankings. The other executive said that Facebook does not favor one political viewpoint over another, nor does Facebook suppress conservative speech. Well, that's when you had Senator Marsha Blackburn say, okay, then can you explain why you pulled my pro-life ad when that was during the 2018 campaign where Twitter deemed it inflammatory. Now, to his credit, the executive in Twitter said it was a mistake, and I apologize that we made a mistake on your ad. Okay. Senator Ted Cruz, and right next to him was Senator Mike Lee, had this poster, and it showed this ad from the Susan B. Anthony list. You know, you've seen some of the individuals and heard some of the individuals, Marjorie Dannenfelser, for example, and others that have been on this program, and it was banned because, are you ready for this? It had a picture of Mother Teresa, yes, and it had a quote from Mother Teresa that said, "Abortion is profoundly anti-woman." I love on the poster, it, on the very top said, "Censored." Ted Cruz kind of got his point on that regard. And then Chuck Konzelman, we just mentioned him just a minute ago. He's the writer and director of the movie Unplanned. He told all sorts of stories about the various obstacles he faced in marketing the movie through Google and Twitter, but give good credit to Facebook that they actually were one of the few social media platforms that actually didn't cause him problems. So we'll give credit where credit is due. But at the end there, Senator Ted Cruz made a real point. And I might just mention, Rafael Cruz will be in studio with us tomorrow. We're going to talk about what socialism is really like and what his experience in Cuba was like before he was able to leave. But anyway, Senator Ted Cruz pointed out that we do have antitrust laws. I don't think he or Mike Lee or many of the other members on that committee want to use them. But he did point out this, that the big tech companies are larger and more powerful than Standard Oil was when it was broken up. And these big tech companies are larger and more powerful than AT&T when it was broken up. So even though you had some Democratic members of the subcommittee saying that these charges of censorship are baseless, I really don't know how they could say that in light of some of the examples. And I've only picked a few in the interest of time because we're coming up to a break. But we're going to pay attention to this. We have been talking about big tech censorship for many years. There's very good, abundant evidence. It showed up the other day in the Senate subcommittee. And if nothing else, those are some topics that we will certainly continue to look out for in the future. When we come back from the break, though, we're going to change topics, and John Barry's going to be with us. He is the author of this book, Jesus Economy, A Biblical View of Poverty, The Currency of Love, and a Pattern for Lasting Change. And I thought this would be an encouragement to you as to what can Christians do to address those who are less fortunate. If indeed we say we don't need more government, the government is getting more money than it's ever received in the history of this nation, and it's still running deficits. We can see where this leads. Eventually, there are going to be people that aren't sure they'll be able to get their check. So what can the church do to reach out to the poor and disadvantaged? We're going to talk about that with John Barry right after these important messages.
It's amazing but true. When it comes to one of America's biggest household expenditures, healthcare, a lot of people think they've got no choice. People are used to thinking we have to do it this way, but they don't. Yes, you have the freedom to choose an alternative with your healthcare. It's MediShare, and it costs way less than the alternatives. The typical family saves $500 a month, not a year, a month. And if you're single, this can save you a lot too. And let's face it, a big reason MediShare is 400,000 people strong, it just works. They've shared over $3 billion in medical bills, so they can help share your needs too. Joining MediShare for so many people is one of those things that makes you say, why didn't I do this before? So yes, the time has come for something better. Look into joining MediShare and see why so many people are opting out of the old way and into the new. Why not look into this? Just call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
This hour, I want to spend some time talking about how we can reach out to the poor and those who are facing poverty, especially a culture of poverty. Might just mention that in my book, Christian Ethics and Plain Language, as well as Christians and Economics, we talk about some of this. Here's the English version of that book, Christians and Economics. Here's the Spanish version of it. And one of the reasons we do that is because of the need for us to kind of think biblically about many of these issues. And one of those issues, of course, is the issue of poverty. So I wanted to spend some time focusing on this book, Jesus Economy: A Biblical View of Poverty, the Currency of Love, and a Pattern for Lasting Change. It is written by John Barry, who, interestingly enough, of course, now heads up Jesus Economy. You can go to jesuseconomy.org, and we have a link to that on the website. But he really comes from a very different kind of background. He's been a Bible scholar, a pastor, of course, author of this book, but he's worked in the area of Christian publishing and Bible software. Those of us that have appreciated Logos software, and I've known Scott Lindsay for literally decades when he first got started at Logos, and of course subscribed to the Bible Study magazine, which John Barry was involved in as well. I've appreciated the work that he's done in that particular venue, but now has focused more of his time and attention on the issue of economics, poverty, and dealing with the impoverished. So, John Barry, it is a delight to have you back here on the program with us.
Oh, it's an honor to join you. Thank you for having me.
And you know Scott Lindsay, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we go way back to Faith Life Logs Bible software days.
Yes, and we've had him on the program as well. So talk about maybe a little bit of your transition. Of course, you've been a pastor, and you've certainly been interested in applying biblical principles to every area of life. But people that know you for being the editor of the Faith Life Study Bible, the Lexham Bible Dictionary, and even the former editor of the Bible Study magazine might say, well, you could be doing Bible software and doing a lot of good on the side, but you felt the real need to develop this idea of Jesus Economy. Tell us a little bit more about its origins.
So, yeah, in 2012, when I was still working for Faith Life Logos Bible software, at that point I was in charge of the publishing division, and I was overseeing Lexham Bible Dictionary, Faith Life Study Bible that you mentioned, and Bible Study Magazine.
Yes.
And I just suddenly felt this deep need as I was exposed to what was going on in the world for more work to be done in bringing people together to alleviate extreme poverty and the issues that people were facing in that. And then also just the realization that there are hundreds of millions of people who do not have access to the name of Jesus, who have no access to the gospel. And I saw a great good that I was able to do there, but I looked at this other problem and I said, well, maybe that's the next venture that God is calling me toward, to try to bring the same level of innovation we brought to Bible study to the work of alleviating poverty and reaching those who haven't yet heard the name of Jesus. And that's really where the idea for Jesus Economy, the organization, came out of, and how I got started on that road, and did that kind of bivocationally, and then eventually went full time about 3 years ago into it. And it's been a wild journey, but it's been really amazing.
Well, again, I commend you for that. And take us to India for just a minute, because that's one of the illustrations you use where you recognize that I really want them to have the gospel. But you came to realize that also drilling a well for the village, providing water, providing various ways in which you could not only renew them spiritually but physically. You said I could no longer just address their physical poverty through aid and relief or just their spiritual poverty through preaching the gospel. The two are intimately connected. And that shouldn't be a surprise to listeners that have been reading missionary biographies, recognizing that oftentimes missionaries recognized they had to feed hungry stomachs before they could feed hungry hearts, if you will. And so both the physical and spiritual needs need to be met. But that was kind of a light bulb moment or an aha moment, an epiphany, if you will, that caused you to say, we need to put the two together.
Yeah, absolutely. The history of what's, technically known as holistic missions, which is the idea of bringing together physical needs and the meeting of spiritual needs, that's been going on for quite some time, especially even in India. But the difference is that what's kind of happened is that we've slowly divorced these things, I think, in the framework of what people are doing, right? Missionaries have become really just about sharing the love of Jesus, and then aid organizations have become just about meeting basic needs. And then there's community development organizations that have become about the economic things and job creation. And what I saw going on in India, in Northeast India, and this is a pocket in Bihar, India, where 100 million people have never heard the name of Jesus. 100 million. And then on top of that, it's one of the poorest places in the world. And the gospel is going forward through indigenous church planting efforts, which is the type of thing we're involved with. But I also realize the power of a church planter to be able to have a community when they tell him, hey, I need access to clean water, to be able to actually provide that, and then to share the love of Jesus in that, and then share about how he's the living water. But then even furthermore, to go one step further and create jobs and job training initiatives that actually provide for people economically so they can put food on their own table. And yeah, that bringing together of those things, the sharing of Jesus, the economic side, and the meeting of needs, that's really, I think, what's needed in the future of our world. And doing all of that in Jesus' name, that's a Jesus economy in my mind.
Well, again, that's the title of the book. And again, there's some great resources here. And of course, the book's been out for a while, so you may be able to find it in your local bookstore, but we have a link to jesuseconomy.org, so you can use it there to get it and to really begin to benefit from some of this. And it does seem to me that this is put together in a way to really educate individuals. But as I was going through the book, John, I was thinking this would be very helpful for someone if they're having a missions conference to maybe kind of open their eyes, broaden their perspective a little bit. And so if individuals wanted to, for example, use this in terms of teaching or training or those kinds of things, that's certainly something that's available to them as well, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. That is high praise. That's my vision of what it could be used for, especially is that, yes, as an individual, it's a great tool, but it's also a great tool to discuss and work through together and to talk about, because the goal of writing the book was I saw this gap, right, in Christian publishing where there were people talking about the spiritual issues of the unreached, the missions issues, and there were people talking about the needs issues, but bringing those together and then also providing really practical tools. Like, okay, so I meet a homeless guy on the street or someone comes into my church who's impoverished. How do I do this well,
yes.
right? So also doing missions here, right, locally. And that's kind of been my background, is that while I was working at Faith Life, I was doing that, right? I was involved in homeless work locally. We have a very large homeless population in my county. And then I was involved with, trying to share the love of Jesus in a county that's primarily unchurched. And then I was involved with these things globally. And I just said, hey, there's all these questions I get from people all the time about how best to do this work. And our churches are encountering the same things that I'm involved with. So how could we provide tools to help people do that?
Very good. Might just mention, too, there's a link there. So if any of you wanted to maybe put you on a platform to speak to a missions conference for a speaking engagement, that's there as well. We're going to look at poverty by the numbers when we come back. You may even want to get something to write with to get some of these facts and figures so that you can share it with others. All that coming up right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Today is tax day, But a more important date is Tax Freedom Day. That is the date when your tax burden is lifted. It is calculated by dividing the official government tally of all taxes collected in each year by the amount of all income earned in each year. Put another way, it's when you're no longer working for the government but are now working for yourself and your family. This year, Tax Freedom Day occurs at the end of the week. And remember, this is an average. Citizens in states like Louisiana already have had their Tax Freedom Day. Citizens in New York have to wait until the middle of May for their Tax Freedom Day. And let me also add that Americans will pay more in taxes than they will spend on food, clothing, and housing combined. But before you declare your freedom from government, I need to tell you about another date. It is called the Cost of Government Day. That's the date on which an average American is paid his share of the financial burden imposed by the spending and regulation that occurs on the federal, state, and local levels. That date occurs a few days after the 4th of July. This date is a little less precise since it is difficult to calculate all the cost of government regulations. Even so, the Cost of Government Day really puts things in perspective. It takes a little more than half of the year to finally get government off your back so that you can begin to earn a living for you and your family. Now, both of these dates help us realize what is happening around us. There is a cost, but often we don't see it. Our taxes are withheld from each paycheck, so we don't often think about what we are paying. And since the cost of most regulations is hidden, we don't see those costs either. But imagine if we had to pay all our taxes today in one lump sum. You can bet there would be an outcry. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From 20th Century Fox and Franklin Entertainment, Breakthrough, starring Chrissy Metz, based on a true story. Breakthrough, rated PG, in theaters Wednesday, April 17th.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Talking with John Barry today about Jesus' economy, a biblical view of poverty, the currency of love, and a pattern for lasting change. Might be able to find the book in your local bookstore, but we also have a link to his website. Of course, we also have an online opportunity for you to get it in paperback or Kindle. But John, let's, if we can, talk about the extent of poverty, and we'll look worldwide because you have a section there which actually has some development goals. One of those goals, obviously, is no poverty. And one of the things that we have seen, and I've used this in talking about this with various guests. I had a commentary recently that came out in which I quoted from Bono. Don't hear us quoting Bono very often, but he was acknowledging what you talk about in the book, and that is extreme poverty around the world has been cut by more than half. A lot of that has to do with the free enterprise system and a variety of other things, and maybe a little bit more peace. But we still have ways to go. But the good news is we have been able to cut the area of extreme poverty, but we still have more to go, and that's why we need to begin to think about what we can do through our churches and through various mission organizations and even through individuals to deal with some of the poverty around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. The achievements we've made since 1990 in being able to actually cut poverty, extreme poverty, that is, by more than half, which is extreme poverty is defined as people living on less than $1.90 a day.
Yeah.
So if you think about that, like there's still a lot of people who would be considered poor, right? They're just not at the point of day in and day out poverty where it's like I could die any day, right? Based on how much money I'm making. That was the stat, right, of the cut in half. But the reality, as you were just hitting at there, is that 1 in 5 people in developing regions still live on less than $1.90 a day. So, I mean, if you were to go to the developing world, 1 in 5 people you meet would live on less than $1.90 a day, and like that's just shocking, right? And
yes.
globally, that's almost 10% of the world's workers who are living in extreme poverty. And so while we've made these great strides, my hesitancy is always that people get a little too overly excited about the great strides we've made, because there's still so much to do. I mean, imagine if you could meet, a global cast of the people around the world, and there was 10 of them representing, 10 different areas of the world. Well, one of those 10, right, even as a worker, going to work every day would still be in extreme poverty. And like, that's just shocking, right? I mean, these are people who day in and day out aren't sure where their meal's going to come from, and aren't sure if, if the water they're drinking is going to kill them, or if, that they could have a medical ailment that they couldn't have met. And the church has to rise to this occasion. Imagine if we dealt with that problem in innovative, smart, sustainable ways in Jesus' name. I mean, that would set an example for the world of what Christianity really means and really should be about.
Let's move from poverty to just the idea of malnourished individuals and malnutrition and those kinds of things, because then you also talk about that issue. And so you've already used that one of those 10 in that room with you is living on less than $1.90 a day, but another person or more are malnourished. Talk about that, if you might.
Yeah, so, I mean, the issue of having sustainable farms, having the local, economy being able to actually provide for my family a nourishing meal, having access to being able to buy that food, those are major issues in the developing world as well. And there's lots of issues that cause that. But one of the most major ones that we often forget about is kind of the negative side of the influence of the global economy, right? When all of a sudden food, becomes something that we're buying out of other regions and importing in massive ways, there can be catastrophic effects to a local economy who now no longer has the food to provide for themselves. And so I think that the answer to these problems is, imagine if the really amazing farmers we had, and this does go on today even, we're actually going to these developing regions and teaching people to farm better and more sustainably, and teaching them how to provide for their local needs. I mean, we could suddenly be addressing these problems and being able to deal with that food scarcity issue. But the other issue there is just simply the consumption, right? Globally, when certain countries are consuming too much, it also hurts our global neighbors who don't have enough locally as a result. And really, at the end of it all comes down to just whether or not people have jobs, right, that are sustainable. And if we can provide ways for that to happen, where our buying power instead is used for good and is used to help our whole world and not just us, those are the kinds of changes that could really change the malnourishment issue.
Let's take just another one. Then I do want to talk about kind of, the Jesus economy, but just a broad area of health. First of all, I think it would shock people when they've been hearing that, well, we've been able to deal with the issue of AIDS, but it's still the leading cause of death among adolescents in Africa. Of course, we already talked about drilling wells and having clean water and sanitation. The kinds of things that every one of our listeners take for granted, you can't take for granted when you go into some of these third world and what I sometimes refer to as fourth world countries, can you?
Yeah, in the developing regions of the world, so say Northeast India, where I've done my primary work, if you were to go to Northeast India and you were to go to a remote village outside of the main city, there would not be access to a proper toilet. You wouldn't have access to clean water, likely. And so all of a sudden you realize, okay, so what happens when people, I mean, this sounds kind of gross to think about, but it's important to think about what happens when people don't have access to plumbing. What occurs is that the soil ends up being corrupted. This comes back to the malnutrition issue. The actual water can become corrupted. And then people just get sick from being around that all the time. So yeah, addressing the issue of clean water, I think, is at the starting point. And then from there, being able to actually provide smart solutions to giving people access to to no longer, having to actually defecate in the street or elsewhere. That's the sort of thing that needs to change and needs to shift. And that's the reality of the developing world, is that they are not where we are by any means in these types of remote villages. And so we really have to have economic development initiatives that are helping change that and are helping provide for a better future.
Let's move from part one, where we've kind of talked about the problem of poverty, to talk about kind of God's view, and maybe just one section which I would really commend to pastors, Sunday school leaders, Bible fellowship leaders, small group leaders, is a section you have on what Jesus really said about poverty. You have quite a number of verses in there, and maybe just helping people begin to look again at some of those passages that our eyes kind of glaze over. I know that's one of the goals of your book, is to just get us to maybe look with a fresh set of eyes at this issue of poverty and what the Bible really says about it.
Yeah, I think that Jesus is, he's so edgy, right? And we often forget just how edgy Jesus is. Jesus is questioning the social norms. He's questioning the barriers put between the poor and the rich, and he's looking at those issues, and he's saying the response of my disciples, of Christians, is to go about actually changing these problems. And then, but then we also kind of misuse Jesus too. Like, we hear him say something like, oh, if somebody asks for your cloak, then give it to them. If someone asks you for money, then give it to them. But those passages are actually contextualized in a way where he's talking about issues of someone who would usually be your enemy. And so he's talking about showing them abundant love, extreme love. He's not talking about creating a handout culture. And that's where I think we often miss it, is we think, okay, well, the solution is just to give someone money, or just to, meet this immediate need right away. But in Jesus' mind, it's really about how we truly love people. And if I'm going to truly love my neighbor, I'm going to do for them what I wish they would do for me, which is I don't need a handout to just meet my needs today. I need someone who's going to enter into a relationship with me, care deeply about my issues, and then help me rise out of that poverty to have a new life where I can provide for myself and have the dignity of work and have the dignity of providing for my family. And that's what I think it means to truly love our neighbors. And that's what Jesus, I believe, is calling us to.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the practical applications. Very good section there on applying Jesus' ancient teachings to our modern context, and certainly get into some of those practical aspects. Also, a section on the first Christian entrepreneur. That would be Paul. And then just a whole section of very practical ideas for overcoming poverty. This can be something in your own neighborhood. I don't want you to always just think that this is something that happens when you get on an airplane and go overseas, because there are ways in which you can help those even in your community, but also ways in which you can love people not only in your neighborhood, but help people globally, and what you can do within your own church. And so we're going to get into some of the practical aspects of the Jesus economy, which is the title of the book. John Barry's with us, and he'll continue with us, and we'll continue our conversation right after this.
It's amazing but true. When it comes to one of America's biggest household expenditures, healthcare, a lot of people think they've got no choice. People are used to thinking we have to do it this way, but they don't. Yes, you have the freedom to choose an alternative with your health care. It's MediShare, and it costs way less than the alternatives. The typical family saves $500 a month, not a year, a month. And if you're single, this can save you a lot too. And let's face it, a big reason MediShare is 400,000 people strong, it just works. They've shared over $3 billion in medical bills, so they can help share your needs too. Joining MediShare for so many people is one of those things that makes you say, why didn't I do this before? So yes, the time has come for something better. Look into joining MediShare and see why so many people are opting out of the old way and into the new. Why not look into this? Just call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Continue our conversation today with John Barry. And again, we have the website, which again would direct you to jesuseconomy.org. And John, just for a minute, since we oftentimes at this time during an interview focus on what's on the website, talk about some of the resources, because there's a great deal of information about your trip to India, planting churches, meeting needs, a place where people can partner with you, and of course a place where they can get the book and other resources. But talk about what is available when people land on your website.
So at jesuseconomy.org, it's a place where you can both give and shop to help those in need around the world. So our idea was, what if we could create a platform where every last dollar you donate goes exactly where you designate? So 100% of that money. So if I want to donate to church planting in Northeast India, or people haven't heard the name of Jesus before, I can do that, and that all goes 100% to Northeast India, to church planters who are doing that work. I can donate to clean water there. I can donate to creating jobs and doing this economic initiatives, or I can just donate to the whole project of what's going on in Northeast India. And then I can also shop fair trade there to actually create jobs through my buying power. And so we're trying to really provide those resources to people to directly connect them to how they can put their dollars to work actually helping those in need around the world.
One of the things you have there is jewelry, and I have a friend that actually goes to India and recognizes that I can have these various women make jewelry, and then I will come back here to the United States and sell those. And she's been doing that for more than a decade or so, and that's the same kind of idea that you have there. So you can not only say, well, I will give to those projects, but I can help maybe even jumpstart some of those projects because I can actually make a difference. And that kind of brings me to one of your chapters here, applying Jesus' ancient teachings to our modern context. One of those is you talk about microloans. It has been quite a while since we've done a program on that, although we've had some things that have been written about it by some interns that have been here and other co-hosts. But talk about that, because that is another way in which individuals can really provide kind of an entrepreneurial opportunity for individuals in other countries.
Yeah, I think microfinance is an amazing idea, right? If I'm a local entrepreneur in the developing world, I don't have a lot of access to jumpstarting my company or getting it going. And the access I do usually have for the average entrepreneur in the developing world is only to like loan sharking. I don't have someone who can actually help me or actually wants to be concerned for me. And banks won't loan me money, of course, because I'm a high risk as a loan in their mind. But in actuality, a lot of these entrepreneurs are very low risk in real life because they're so committed to actually providing a better way for their family. And so microfinance, I believe, is a big key where we can provide a small, $500 to $1,000 type loan where someone can get their company going. But then I also think there's a component we have to add to that, which is thinking about e-commerce as an initiative that can help entrepreneurs. So imagine if not only do I get a loan and can start a company and get it going and provide jobs that way, but then I can repay that loan through new money coming into my economy to buy products from me. And that's where I think the online marketplace is so critical. So I talk about that as microloans with e-commerce in mind, right? The idea that my loan is repaid as someone buys product from me to sell on an international market. And then that brings new money into my economy and allows me to create more jobs and for that economy to actually change.
And that's one of the places where the internet and the online business world has changed everything, not only here in the United States, but as you point out, worldwide. And so this is a way to alleviate poverty, but also just a power, as you talk about, to create jobs and to bring products together into one marketplace. So these are kind of new initiatives that bring the desire to reach out to the poor using the best, if you will, best practices and best technology of the 21st century. And that's where I think, again, your giftedness has allowed us to really begin to see how that could be used and be another very significant avenue for alleviating poverty.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's been a really amazing to watch how God has kind of used these skills and background that I could have never put together, right? Going to work for a Bible software company, launching a print magazine through online subscriptions for a print magazine, right? The connection of creating, new innovative Bible study products like Faith Life Study Bible and Lexham Bible Dictionary. All those things taught me how to kind of think about these other issues in our world. And that's where I'm so grateful to my time at Faith Life that it gave me an opportunity to say, what if I could put that same energy into this problem of saying, wow, we could really help an entrepreneur here who I meet in India or Haiti or elsewhere to then connect them to this global marketplace of people who then get this amazing access to these incredibly handmade products that are beautiful and represent local cultures and can really share kind of a global community and mind. And I just think that's a beautiful vision. So that's where we're trying to go, right? A world where all those people get to come together to really better our world and each of our lives in the process.
Very good. Just before we take another break, let's say if we can, you mentioned Bihar, India, and anybody that reads your book, it starts with that story. You have a whole section on, when Jesus comes to town. I saw Jesus once. Talk about that for just a minute, because you've sort of used that illustration, and it's certainly been a place where you have focused your time and energy. But we are talking about, as you said, a place that has been unreached primarily with the gospel. It's hot, it's humid, it's full of very significant challenges. But in light of that, what happens when you bring the gospel, the full holistic gospel, to a particular region that has never heard it before?
Well, what's amazing about village-based communities is that oral storytelling is a very big part of their culture. So when you come along into a village like this and you get to shadow church planters like I've done, you see that like the whole village comes out like what's described in the Gospels, right? It's like watching the Gospels in real life. And, they come out and they hear the stories of Jesus and they hear about his freedom. And in a place like Northeast India, that is huge, because there's social structures in place that keep people poor and keep people on the underside of power. And the freedom of Jesus says you are valuable and you are important, and your life deserves liberty, and you deserve the pursuit of happiness, and you deserve the joy of Christ. And he has died for you and risen for you. And when that happens, whole communities can change. And you see that occurring, right, where the church is at the center of economic development and the meeting of basic needs and bringing the love of Jesus. And that is igniting new life into people and transforming whole villages at a time. And it's recognized by even other people around who maybe don't necessarily share the same beliefs, because they see that Jesus' love is that meaningful and that sacrificial and that important.
Just like the book of Acts. Since we're talking about the book of Acts for a minute, you have a section here where you talk about St. Paul, or the Apostle Paul, says little, that implies a lot, about poverty, and he was, as you referred to, the first Christian entrepreneur. What can we learn about this issue of poverty and reaching out to the impoverished from some of the writings of the Apostle Paul?
Well, I think when we look at Paul, we often look at his track record in church planting, but we forget that he, in doing church planting, first of all, he was already entrepreneurial, but he was also, for the majority of the time, paying his own way through his own business as a tent maker, which it appears he was in partnership with Priscilla and Aquila to do that, and others. And he was so good at this that he could show up in a new town and make a successful business and be there for 18 months or so or less and leave and do it somewhere else. And I think that says something about the skills that we as Christians often forget to look at. Like with the business leaders in our community, they have the power to not just fund the mission, which is kind of how we usually treat them, which is important, but not the only thing. They also have the power to share their skills and to also share about Jesus bivocationally, just like Paul did, right, in addition to what they're doing in their work and through their work. And I think that was strategic for Paul, right? He is in the marketplace making tents because it connects him to people, and it gives him opportunity to share about Jesus that way too. And that's powerful. So suddenly that redeems the idea of God using business for great good and for this incredible work of the gospel going forward.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll come back with just a few very quick practical suggestions, which you can find in the book. And again, it is a book that has about 180 pages. It also recommends other books you might want to read. And if you find yourself saying, well, I'd like to know a little bit more, of course, we have a link to Jesus Economy, and it is all available on our website today, jesuseconomy.org. There's a place where you can partner with them, a place where you can contact and maybe even have John Barry speak for you, as well as a place where you can shop and donate. So there's just all sorts of great resources available at our website, pointofview.net. So let me encourage you to go there. Come back, we'll give you just a few more practical suggestions out of the book, Jesus Economy, and then we'll be done for the day. But I just thought this would be a great opportunity for you to learn a little bit more about how to apply biblical principles to this very daunting task of global poverty and even poverty in your own community. We'll be right back.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
A few more minutes with the Jesus Economy. And again, this is a book that I would commend to you. Part 4 talks about some very practical ideas for overcoming poverty in which we can truly love people. Let's take one maybe locally, truly loving the homeless. Again, lots of very practical ideas, but I love how it starts. I met a homeless person who needs help. What do I do? That's a question I'm sure you've had asked of you many times, haven't you?
Yeah, it's been quite a part of my life, actually. I get this one a lot. And for me, the answer there is to really stop and enter into a conversation. That's what you see Jesus doing, right? Jesus on the road to Jericho, Here he is with only 3 years of ministry time available to him, and he stops and he actually enters into a conversation with this man who needs healing, and he literally asks the man, "What can I do for you?" Right? The conversation is a real relationship, and I think that that's the type of thing we have to do, and then we have to know about the resources to direct people to. So, if I give somebody money, I could be buying them their last drink. I don't think that's ever the solution, unless you, by the hand of God, feel called to do that. I recommend not doing that otherwise. And in that instance, what I really want to do instead is to say, okay, what local resources can I point this person toward? Is there a local rescue or homeless mission I can point them to? Is there a place where I know they can get a meal? Is there a place where I know they can learn about general opportunities to get back on their feet? And where can I help them engage in actually changing their situation? I think that's the solution, is to take the extra time, actually. And I think that's actually harder.
Oh, sure.
But I do believe that that's what Jesus would call us to.
One of the other things, to move from local to the other, global, you have a section here, truly loving people globally. And then you also have the idea of short-term missions and some others. John, we have a number of individuals that are pastors, Sunday school leaders, small group teachers, those kinds of things that are listening. And they're saying, okay, I'm with you. We need to obviously do more in our church, but I'm not sure what that looks like. Can you give us a little bit more of some specificity there so that I can begin to think about going to the developing world and beginning to really address some of those very significant needs that we find in various parts of the world?
Yeah, I think that globally, when we think about partners and we think about those relationships, we want to think about a couple things. One of which is, where is God calling me, and is there a way that I can do that where I'm actually helping empower the local leadership, right? So I think that the real solution there is to say, okay, what skills can I bring to that setting that they may not have, such as certain kinds of training or things that I could actually help the locals with, that then gives them that skills to go on forward from. And that really starts the conversation, right? Again, it's kind of like the question Jesus asked, what can I do for you? I think we often forget to ask this question of our global friends. We just assume we know what they need. And we may not, right? We very well could be wrong. We actually likely do not know what they need. And they know what they need. So asking them, how can we actually help you, rather than saying, this is the thing we're going to do for you, that's kind of the first shift we have to make. And then we have to look at the assets we have that we can actually bring to the table to help with those things.
And sometimes the assets are not ones that we naturally think about. It might be computer programming, it might be leadership skills, it might be all sorts of things we haven't thought about. But one other one is, you can also talk about truly loving via your church. And one of those is making a community development plan. Now, I know from even where we're broadcasting here, because we also focus on some of the local opportunities, I can drive not far from this studio, and if I worked hard enough, I could actually talk to people that speak almost 100 different languages. Some that have come over here because they've been able to seek asylum, others that have come over here as part-time workers, others that probably are here illegally, all of that. And so you sometimes in the church think about ministering to the needs of the people that come and sit in the pews, but you're really challenging us to begin to think about how you would help people outside of your church addressing issues which range from poverty to English as a second language to some of the job skills that are going to be necessary for them to be successful in the world. So you're really talking about being very intentional about developing this community development plan, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that plan is a key word there, right? You have to stop and look at that as a plan. I think there's a couple of key changes we can shift in our thinking that are really relatively easy, but we think of them as really big, but they're not that big when it comes down to it. They're small and they can make a big difference. And one of those is to say, what are the assets available to me? Again, asking that same question, right? I maybe have these business leaders in my community that can teach someone how to learn a certain skill and go to work, or maybe they have connections to jobs for these people, or maybe there's someone in my community who knows about teaching English as a second language, or someone who knows how to teach financial literacy. And then all of a sudden my church becomes a hub for that community development. And that suddenly shifts the focus. Right now I'm looking outward and I'm calling people toward this hub where we can all grow together. And that becomes a missions outreach. And that's kind of the other shift, right? Is that if our church isn't about the mission of Jesus, what are we about, right? And we have to be about the mission of Jesus. He called us to go and make disciples. And so the act of going and sending isn't just as individuals, but as a community, strategically saying, how can we help those on the underside of power who are hurting and who are in need, and how can we actually provide a better way forward for them? And in the process, sharing the love of Jesus. I think that's a beautiful picture.
I think so, too. Again, the book is entitled Jesus Economy, A Biblical View of Poverty, the Currency of Love, and a Pattern for Lasting Change. And I might just mention that if people want to contact you, and they may, to have you come and speak or maybe even get some consultation, it's very simple. It's john@jesuseconomy.org. About as easy as you can possibly come up with. Of course, there's a contact point there as well. We have information about that on the website, and you may want to donate. You may want to go. You may want to just shop and find something there that can actually then make a difference in the life of one of those individuals that we've been talking about. So, John, I appreciate you giving us some time here on Point of View. I thank you for writing the book, and thank you for your vision and taking your gifts and your expertise into a new environment and making a difference for Jesus Christ.
Oh, thank you. It's been an honor to join you, too.
Again, the book is entitled Jesus Economy, and you should be able to find it in your local bookstore. If you can't, and since it's been out for a while, maybe it will not be as easy to obtain, then I would encourage you to go to their website, jesuseconomy.org. Of course, we have all of that information available at our website, pointofview.net, and I think you'll find it very helpful. Let me just mention, as I said yesterday and even today, that tomorrow I will have Rafael Cruz in studio for our conversation. And then Doug Groteis will be with us in the second hour. So I think you're going to find these conversations, first of all, very different, but very interesting. One of the reasons I bring Rafael Cruz in here is because he's got an incredible story about what it is like to grow up in Cuba, to bring in what you think is your salvation, your Savior, and find out it didn't work out quite so well. And then, of course, left Cuba, and of course is the father of Senator Ted Cruz. But especially as we've talked about this issue of socialism, a clear and present danger, I still don't think that the younger generation recognizes what socialism is. So we're going to have a little bit of a reality check tomorrow with Rafael Cruz in studio of the first hour, and so we'll spend some time with him. Doug Groteis will be, of course, oftentimes likes to talk about apologetics, but he also loves jazz, so we're going to broaden it from just the standard kind of apologetics to what I call cultural apologetics, and I think you're going to enjoy that conversation as well. And then, of course, all through the week, it's getting ready for Easter. I hope that you'll be with us every single day. If you want to know a little bit more about some of the things we've talked about today, it's all available at our website, pointofview.net. I want to thank Andrew and Steve for their help behind the scenes. We'll see you back here tomorrow, right here on Point of View.
It's amazing but true. When it comes to one of America's biggest household expenditures, healthcare, a lot of people think they've got no choice. People are used to thinking we have to do it this way, but they don't. Yes, you have the freedom to choose an alternative with your health care. It's MediShare, and it costs way less than the alternatives. The typical family saves $500 a month, not a year, a month. And if you're single, this can save you a lot too. And let's face it, a big reason MediShare is 400,000 people strong, it just works. They've shared over $3 billion in medical bills, so they can help share your needs too. Joining MediShare for so many people is one of those things that makes you say, why didn't I do this before? So yes, the time has come for something better. Look into joining MediShare and see why so many people are opting out of the old way and into the new. Why not look into this? Just call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.